Hello, everybody. Mike Molina here. Well, I have an exciting guideline change within FHA. It's been around for a few months, but it's not getting a lot of attention, so I wanted to highlight it and explain to you how important and how impactful it can be. About a month or so ago, I got a call from an agent. She had a buyer that had started a loan with a different lender, and apparently they made several mistakes in pre-qualifying that buyer, and all of a sudden she found herself in the position of the buyer was selling one home and buying another one, and so it was a pretty bad situation because they needed to close in a few weeks, and suddenly they didn't have a loan. So she reached out to me to see if there was anything I could do. And what we ended up doing in that particular case is the buyer, who's also a seller, she was short of income. They'd incorrectly calculated her income. And she'd owned her home for about 3 years, and she was living with her boyfriend. And so I asked her, after we exhausted every other possibility, I'm like, does your boyfriend happen to pay you any sort of rent? And she's like, yeah, he pays me every month. I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. And so I said, can we document that? She's like, he pays me cash. I was like, oh, okay. But what I was able to do is get all of her bank statements and show that she had made cash deposits around the same time every single month for approximately the same amounts. And so that's something called border income that we've never ever been able to use before with FHA loans, but I was able to count $1,500 a month of border income because of the situation she was in. So I'm going to share with you real quick, this won't be long, how the guideline works and how it can help you not only close more buyers, help them qualify for higher purchase prices, and also build your pipeline for future buyers, all with this one guideline. It's pretty fantastic, so let me get into it with you. Okay, so what we are talking about is something called border income. Now, this is income received by the borrower who is renting out space within their dwelling unit. And their dwelling unit can be an apartment that they rent or a home that they own. So let's go through the guidelines one at a time. So first up, to be clear, a border is not a tenant renting an ADU on the same property. That is its own separate thing. So an ADU is a separate unit, you have a tenant, and they rent that separate unit from you. A boarder is somebody that's renting space within your own dwelling unit. So, for example, you rent a 3-bedroom apartment or you own a home with multiple bedrooms. You decide to rent out 1 or 2 bedrooms to other people, and they pay you rent every month for renting out that space. That is called a boarder, and the income you receive from it is called border income. So it is permitted whether the buyer, the borrower trying to qualify for the loan, whether they own the dwelling unit or they rent it. So this works just as well if a person is renting a 3-bedroom apartment and they've had roommates that have been paying them rent for the past year. We can count that, okay? So the amount of border income that we're trying to use as part of the qualifying income for the transaction cannot exceed 30% of the total qualifying income. So just to keep the math simple, let's say we have $10,000 of qualifying income on a loan. No more than 30% of that, $3,000, can be income from border income. Regardless of what the total amount of income is, it cannot exceed 30% of the total qualifying income. The borrower or buyer or borrower must have a 12-month rental history that we can document, okay? And the borrower must have a 12-month history of receiving border income. This is where the guideline is a little fuzzy because the next thing you're going to see is that it says that we have to document that the borrower has received income, border income, for 9 of the most recent 12 months. So it says that we have to document they have a 12-month history of receipt, and we have to document the actual receipt of the rental income for 9 out of the last 12 months. I think what they're saying is that whether it's through a lease or other means that we show that they've been receiving it in some form or fashion, but the actual evidence of the money itself being received, we only need 9 out of the last 12 months. And the best part of that is that it doesn't have to be the most recent 9 consecutive months. Out of the last 12 months, as long as months here or there, if there's 9 of them, that counts. And that's important because that was actually the case with my client that I just told you the story about. There was a couple months that were missing, they weren't really missing, but it looked like they were missing on the bank statement, so we deleted them, but we still had more than 9, and we were able to count it just fine. So that is a very important and flexible part of this whole guideline. So we need documentation that the boarder lives at our borrower's current address, where they're supposedly renting a room or what have you, all right? We need a written agreement between the borrower and the boarder, the person renting the room, or persons renting the room. And it can be an official lease, it can be a letter that they both sign, just some form of written agreement that documents that they're renting and what the terms are. And they also have to indicate that they intend to move with our buyer borrower to the new property that he or she is buying. Now, it's also important to note, this is how flexible this guideline is. So if we have a buyer borrower that's trying to use income from this, it doesn't mean that it has to be the same boarder for the last 12 months. So, John could have started in January renting a room from our buyer borrower, okay? And then 6 months later move out, and then, Joe moves in and rents the most recent 6 months. So they're two different boarders, but she's been receiving boarder income for the last 12 months, and it works, so it doesn't matter. Not only that, we can use income from multiple boarders. So if Joe and John both are renting rooms from our buyer borrower, and we can document it with all the other guidelines, the written agreement, 9 out of the last 12 months received, document that they live there, then we can use both of the incomes from the boarder income from both of those tenants, okay, boarders, I should say, as so long as it doesn't exceed the 30% guideline of the total qualifying income. So that is an extremely powerful and flexible guideline, and it will help you immediately with people that may be in this situation. It will also help you with filling up your pipeline, because now you have something to talk about people. We've all had clients where they're great borrowers, they have great credit, they have a good solid job, but they're by themselves, and it's a good job, but it doesn't pay that much. Maybe it's $35,000, $40,000 a year, and it's very difficult to buy a home, especially currently with rates being as high as they are, with a $40,000, $45,000 a year income. We can, and if they're in a type of industry where it doesn't look like they're going to be receiving major promotions and significant wage or salary increases, other than the standard cost of living every year, we can set them up on a path for home ownership. If they don't have boarders, we can present this as an option. Say, hey, you're living in this apartment where you have some spare bedroom or a spare bedroom, rent it out, document it like this, so we do the whole pre-approval way in advance, fully vet them, and say, okay, if you rent out a room for this much money for the next, 12 months, then in a year you'll qualify for this much more. And I've already got people set up on that program, just like that. So it's a great way to keep in touch with people, build up your pipeline, offer them something of value that other people are not offering them and not talking to them about. So I think this is a great strategy because it gives you something significant and important to talk to people about that not a lot of other people are either going to want to talk about or even know about and can. So I think that's something super exciting, and there's so many different ways that we can approach this in terms of marketing and helping clients lay foundations for future home ownership if they don't qualify right now. So that's something I'd be happy to talk with you about anytime, so please just let me know. Just a quick reminder, below the video, there's several resources available for you to use for both your buyers and your sellers and just your personal edification. There's the buyer's guide in English and in Spanish. There's the seller guide in English and in Spanish. And there's the monthly market report. All of those you can download. I can brand them to your personal brand if you like. They're also available as PowerPoint presentations. Just let me know. They're beautifully done. They have lots of graphs and charts and useful information that you can use in your marketing presentations, listing presentations, buyer consultations, whatever. So feel free to download them. They're not copyrighted at all, so use them in whole or in part as you see fit. Well, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If I could please ask, like the video, share the video with somebody you think that will find this information helpful and useful, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Take care.